Hello, everybody. This is the Foreign Press Association of New York, and I am Ian Williams, the president. And today it gives me a great deal of pleasure to bring on a presidential candidate of a more serene disposition than the one we've been seeing recently in the United States. Gyari Dolma is the presidential candidate for the World Tibetan Organization, Government in Exile, and is closely aligned, I gather, to the Dalai Lama, but they have a secular election. The Dalai Lama is not officially a political figure. Maybe presidential elections would be better if they were identified at birth and nurtured instead of being thrust from the height of their billionaire father's eminence, but that's another story. We also have with us Bill Holstein from the Overseas Press Club, one of our China experts who is often with us on these issues. And we're hoping that Gyari Dolma will tell us not just about the election, what does it mean? What is the Tibetan government in exile? What power does it have? What functions does it have? But also to discuss some of the issues that are now involved. I mean, Tibetans for many years and other people who are watching have said that the Chinese are missing their best opportunity because the Dalai Lama is somebody who has one of the, let's say, the authority, the clout to deliver a deal from the Tibetan side, and also the temperament to be able to seek a reasonable compromise with the People's Republic. He was, after all, not quite a confidant, but he met Mao Dze Dung, which not many people left alive who can say that. He knew the Chinese leadership. He knows the pluses and minuses, and he is not a rabid nationalist or xenophobic person. So he would be prepared to discuss a deal if the Chinese were. I'm not quite sure whether that still applies in the wake of the failure of the Hong Kong deal, because it shows what we're dealing with in terms of promises. So, Dolma, please explain your election campaign and how's the polling on the votes? Have you got your lawyers ready?
Thank you so much for having me together with all of you here today. So I and members of the Foreign Press Association of New York and Bill Tashidelek once again. And yes, so I'm here for my election campaigns, and I really don't know where I should start from, because everything about Tibet, when I get a chance to speak, I want to be telling everything. But anyway, I will just go to 2011. In fact, it was in 2011 that the first democratically elected Tibetan political leadership came up to take the political responsibility of the Tibetan administration. In fact, as you would know, that His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the institution of the Dalai Lama, has been the spiritual and the temporal undisputed leader of the Tibetans and Tibet. However, under very difficult situations and circumstances, after Tibet was occupied by the People's Republic of China, His Holiness the Dalai Lama did try to live within that framework, but it did not work. So he was compelled, His Holiness was compelled to come out of Tibet in 1959. And immediately on coming into exile, His Holiness the Dalai Lama tried introducing democratic reforms within the Tibetan government in exile. And it was in 2011 that we had the first democratically elected political leadership, when His Holiness decided in 2010, in fact, that he decided to absolutely, devolve, relinquish and devolve his political powers to an elected, uh, leadership of the Tibetan people. It is sad that we today are not it is not possible for us to have a free, fair election in our own country. But while in exile, this was initiated by the guidance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Of course, I was a member of the Tibetan Parliament at that time when His Holiness decided to devolve his power completely. I was serving as the deputy speaker, and it was unimaginable for us. However, as reluctant as we were to make the amendments, but His Holiness left no option for us but to follow his instructions. So therefore, after the devolution of power by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, so 2011, we had the first politically elected leadership. And now we are here again, where Dr. Lobsang Sangye, our political leader, the president of the Central Tibetan Administration, who studied in Harvard over here in the United States of America, having been for 2 terms elected by the Tibetan people, is finishing his term. And in the Tibetan administration, we have, a rule that the president or an executive body member will serve not more than 2 terms.
Term limits, we call it.
Yes, we have that term limit. So now, yes, the time has come and I've decided to contest. And so, yes, this is in brief what it is like. Now, if I come to, sorry.
I was just about to say, how big is the electorate and where are they?
Well, our number of the voters, the electorate, is not so large as one would think. We are in exile about 150,000 approximately, a little up, down. And this time, registered voters, as I understand, are about around 80,000. Around 80,000. But what is interesting in our election process is that our constituency, the voters' constituency, is, you can say, spread all over the world. Because any Tibetan who is a bona fide Tibetan, any person who's a bona fide Tibetan, irrespective of where one is living, if there is a suitable number whereby a election commission or a committee can be formulated, they can vote and elect or contest this election. So in exile, we have Tibetans in India, Nepal, Bhutan, and America, Canada, Australia, the whole of Europe, Taiwan, Japan. And in all these countries, we would be all voting on the same day.
Huh. May I ask about some basic facts about what's going on in Tibet? We hear so little, but I've met Tibetans who say that 1.5 million Tibetans have been killed. I mean, they're dead as a result of Chinese repression in recent years, and as many as 2 million Tibetans has been forced to flee Tibet. I mean, what are the numbers of how bad has it been in Tibet?
See, the last census of the Tibetans was done somewhere around late 1950s. According to that, we are 6 million Tibetans. Out of the 6 million Tibetans, it is a recorded fact that 1.2 million Tibetan people by late 1960s died or were killed as a direct result of China's invasion of our country. And when His Holiness the Dalai Lama came into exile, about 80,000 Tibetan refugees followed His Holiness the Dalai Lama into exile in late 1950s, in 59 or early 1960s. And also later till, you can say from 1979, 1980, 81, and till about a decade back, we did have Tibetans who managed to come to study and to see His Holiness the Dalai Lama into exile also.
This Communist Party Secretary of Xinjiang, Mr. Chen, was previously the Communist Party Secretary in Tibet, and we've seen in Xinjiang, and we've read about extensively about forced labor camps and bans against religion, widespread use of facial recognition technology with artificial intelligence, and he came from Tibet. Did he do many of these same things in Tibet? Has he subjected the Tibetan people to the same kind of things we're hearing about coming out of Xinjiang?
You know, whatever we are hearing about what's happening in Xinjiang today is very, very unfortunate. And I strongly condemn all these acts of the People's Republic of China. And let me also tell you that these were the things happening in Tibet for the last over 60 decades also.
Six decades.
It is just that, yes, absolutely, you know, concentration camps, and even today. But only thing is that information so very difficult to come out, and they are done in different names under different disguises. Either sometimes they call it the re-education or indoctrination, or sometimes it is actually to say that you know, to promote Tibetan culture and religion. Names are given differently, but the act is the same. And in fact, don't forget that, you know, Tibet was one of the first part of the People's Republic of China, as they claim, used for dumping nuclear waste also.
It's also been used in Xinjiang and in Inner Mongolia as well as Tibet. One of the policies seems to be to move vast numbers of Han immigrants in there. So in a sense, it's a sort of ethno-genocide in the sense that you don't have to get rid of the existing people, but you can outnumber them by bringing many more in from outside and shipping in Han culture, Han language, and making it the norm. How is that perceived in Tibet?
Yes, I think, you know, I'm glad that now more and more people in the world are talking about it, writing about it. But let us, so in the case of Tibet, if you look back in 1965, when the United Nations passed a resolution condemning the violation of human rights by the People's Republic of China inside Tibet, they talked about genocide. It was, even in 1965 recorded, it was genocide in Tibet. And then when we take it a decade forward, if we do, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when he in America, when he was here and he addressed the US Congress as early as in 1900 and I think it was in 87, he proposed his 5-point peace plans. And that one of the most important points that His Holiness highlighted was the transfer of population. The Tibetans are becoming minority in our own country, you know. So the transfer of population, making an ethnic group a minority in their own country, has been a game plan of China right from the beginning. It is just that now, when the overwhelming result of that, when the world is seeing more clearly, I'm so glad that the world today are concerned. We always, you know, for a long time, we Tibetans have been saying the world is so concerned sometime about certain animals or species that are extinguishing. Well, we as a human race, that is what happening with us also. So yes, this has been not a new thing that is happening. And now with this new thing that China has come, the Communist Party, I would say rather, is ethnic unity. Yeah, ethnic unity, that this propaganda of ethnic unity is very, very dangerous again. This is just aimed This is a planned genocide strategy of the communist people. In one end they talk about the minorities right, ethnic rights, and the other end they're now talking about the Xi Jinping's socialist cultural society, whatever name he may want to give to it. But then yes, they want to turn the whole land into a handland.
Do you sense that the international climate of opinion is shifting at all about China in terms of what they've done in Hong Kong, the South China Sea, the threats against Taiwan, threats against Australia? Do you sense that of course, China is very powerful in the world. They basically own 40 or 50 different countries. But do you sense that in the Western world in particular, that there's a shift in thinking about China, and that this might be a period of time, not today, not tomorrow, but there might be a period of time when the West gives you more support, greater support in your cause?
Bill, I definitely feel that this is a time where the world must check ourselves, not just for the sake of Tibetans or those others who are under Chinese illegal occupation, or people who are denied basic human rights today, not just in China, but anywhere in the world. It is not just a concern of this deprived people, but for the world at large. If we have to maintain a check and balance, if we want a better world for our children tomorrow, I think it is time that some of the uh, actions of the Communist Party has to be taken into account. And this is a good time. This is a good time, and it must be done. And therefore, I believe that it is also a good time for us, the Tibetans, to be able to draw your attention, to raise our voice, so that at a time where things, geopolitical strategies are being re-looked into, that the voiceless people are not left behind. So that is my sincere effort as a Tibetan, making my efforts to be heard. So therefore, though I am here for my election campaign, but I do believe that it gives me a chance to at least get the attention of people like yourself, so that I get a platform to speak for my people. So I consider that we have to be able to tell the world that we are here and we are suffering and we need your help.
In a sense, you have two separate audiences, because you're talking to the world and trying to get their sympathy, and you're also talking to Beijing, or presumably sending messages. Whether they're listening or not is another story. But
Oh, they're listening.
you're sending
Yes.
messages to Beijing and say, well, look, we were prepared to do this if you were there. So you have, it's incumbent upon you to appear to be extremely reasonable and flexible if you're going to get the support of the rest of the world. So does this cause conflicts within the Tibetan community, between the diehards who want no accommodation with Beijing at all, and people who are prepared to go and accept, various degrees of autonomy and suzerainty in return for, a substantial autonomy?
uh, you know, uh, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, you know, His Holiness the Dalai Lama believes that this is the century of dialogue. This is the century of negotiation. And this is this century where through nonviolence, through negotiations, political solution, lasting political solution can be sought and can be achieved. And we Tibetans believe in this basic principle. So therefore, we do look towards being able to sit with the Communist Party leadership and to talk for future Tibet. Yes, but yet at the same time, we cannot hesitate to speak about the facts of the violations of human rights, the suffering our people are going through today. So that has to go together.
So have the Chinese shown any appreciation of the fact that, I don't know how to put this delicately, but the Dalai Lama is presumably approaching the end of this particular incarnation. So if they want to talk to him in his present reasonable avatar, they haven't got that much time left. Have they shown any sense of fleeting time?
Absolutely. I mean, I cannot speak on behalf of the Chinese, but if I were the Chinese leadership, if I was in Beijing, I would really consider this time very precious, very precious. If China wants stability in China, particularly in occupied Tibet, a solution must be found. And the only solution that can be found is through dialogue. And one such an individual, one such an institution today is amongst us who can help the Tibetan people and the Chinese leadership come to a logical end and also assure, at least from the Tibetan side, that whatever comes as a result of the negotiation would be carried on, would be honored by the Tibetan people. I cannot say from the Chinese side, but we can hope for the best. You know, of course, you mentioned about Hong Kong. We also have our own experience with China, but yet we are ready to sit, we are ready to talk. The Communist Party must realize that oppression, human oppression, genocide must end. If they claim and if they want Tibet to remain within the framework of the Chinese constitution, if they tell the world that we Tibetans are Chinese, then they themselves must start treating us as them. They never look to us as Chinese. No, I don't think so. So they have to start doing that. And therefore, all the more reason, I think today, because of His Holiness Dalai Lama still being with us, if I were the Chinese leadership, I would think this is the best and the right time to talk, but later it can be too late.
What are the implications of the fallout between India and China? Many Tibetan refugees are in Dharamsala and Darjeeling and places like that. And so the Indians have not encouraged the Tibetans to be aggressive in any way or be forceful in any way. In fact, I believe they've discouraged it. But now that India and China have fought on their border and Indian soldiers have been killed and the Indians have kicked out the Chinese TikTok and other applications from their market, do you sense a different tone coming from the Indian government?
Bill, I would definitely say that, the mood of the Indian population is more and more evident and clear. Even among the Indian think tanks, we hear more and more of them coming to a realization that just being overcautious with China is not enough. Just being nice with the Communist Party is not helpful enough in finding a solution. So therefore, I do see that they have, I think many of them have come to accept, and I also plead to them that they must accept that a solution, a lasting solution, can be based only on facts and truth. And the truth is that Tibet and India shared borders. That today, Tibet is under occupation of People's Republic of China, and that the borders between independent Tibet and India has long been demarcated. So we do hope that India will come to recognizing the fact that India had political, historical, spiritual relation with independent Tibet.
Ian, I see we have some questions.
I've been busy looking at the screen. Let me see. How is the election being conducted? Is Tibet unique in having a global election? And what are the unique challenges of this process? Which also leads to a question I want to throw in. Are there any challenges? Are you running unopposed, or are there people running against you?
Well, first of all, yes, our elections are also very competitive, and we are many aspirants who are in the race. Yes, I'm the only woman in the race, but we are, I think, 7 or 8 of us there, in the race.
There's
So the
7 or 8
competition
candidates.
is very much there, I would say. Having said that, I would also want to share with you that we have a very unique democratic system. We have a democracy which is a partyless democracy. So therefore, our election process is a little different from many other democratic countries. Like in America, if I compare, for your presidential elections, we see, the political parties like the Republicans and the Democrats, they first go under a process where they elect or select their candidate. So because we do not have a political party, it is for the Tibetan population on the whole to decide who would become the candidates. So therefore, we have 2 rounds of polling, voting 2 rounds. So right now we are in the preliminary round. So therefore, I call myself an aspirant. I'm somebody who has come forward and said, I'm ready to take the responsibility if given a chance. So similarly with the other candidates. So on the 3rd of Jan 2021, there will be polling. And at that time, any Tibetan can nominate any one person who, of course, there's certain qualification required that a person has to be above the age of certain age and also whatever. So first round is the preliminary round where we will decide who would be the candidates. Now the election commission, our Tibetan election commission has already announced this time that out of the people so nominated by the Tibetan population, the election commission will take only 2 final candidates. The 2 final candidates would be those 2 candidates who secures the highest number of votes in the preliminary round. So once the candidates are finalized, then we will again have our final voting that would be in April. So I know it's a long process, but our system is unique and where we believe this is the best system, though a little time consuming, because in many cases, sometimes the population or people of the constituency don't even know their candidates well. But in our case, the candidates are also decided and chosen by the people.
I
Do
think
the people,
compared with what we've been through in the United States, that sounds like a rocket-assisted fast-track process over the last year. But surely has the Dalai Lama indicated any preferences? Because I'm sure, despite his self-proclaimed abdication from politics, I'm sure that if he winked in one direction, there'd be a lot of Tibetans who would go that way.
If His Holiness shows even a slight inclination towards any one candidate, then we know what the result would be.
That's right, exactly.
So therefore, no, His Holiness the Dalai Lama tries very, very hard, and he, makes sure that nobody is also able to use the institution of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In fact, our election commission is also very strict in this regard. During our election campaigns, we are not even allowed to use photograph of His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
are you able to maintain connections with the Tibetans inside Tibet, inside China? I mean, do they know that you're having this election?
Well, I think because of social media, though there is restrictions, but however, I do know, and we have certain indications that people inside Tibet or inside, under the Chinese occupation, they are watching us too. But how many of them are able to or not, it's difficult for me to say. But I know they are watching.
We have a question from Sange Taithi. Is it, there hasn't been a woman elected to a high position in the Tibetan government so far, and as looking across the world, the countries like Germany, New Zealand, Taiwan, I like to put in the mention Taiwan there just to annoy the other people, Iceland and Finland, who are led by women and doing a lot better. Is this an issue in the Tibetans that Tibetans are saying it's about time we had a woman to lead us and save us from COVID and the Chinese?
Yes, I do see that among people who are supporting me or have expressed their support and who has come forward openly to endorse me as their candidate. Some of them have also mentioned the points that you have done here. Yes, this is, I think, if I get elected, I would be the first female political, leader ever. But let us not forget that, earlier, before Tibet was occupied by the People's Republic of China, our system was very, very different. But His Holiness the Dalai Lama, at a very young age, after taking responsibility, political responsibility of the government, of the Tibetan government, did try initiating some democratic reforms, some reforms while he was very, very young inside Tibet, but was not very successful because of the presence of Chinese by then in our country. And after coming into exile, immediately coming into exile, His Holiness was here in 1959 in India. And by 1960, September, we already had our Tibetan, people's representative, the Assembly of Tibetan People's Deputies. And then it came to the attention of His Holiness that actually no woman got elected to the Assembly of Tibetan People's Deputies. And then, His Holiness took certain initiative for women empowerment and women's participation. And gradually, like today, we have reserved seat for women in the Tibetan parliament. Out of, so I think this process had begun. Women coming and taking more political responsibilities. I, for one, I believe I'm an example of that very process. I became a Tibetan parliament member at the age of 26, 27, and it was possible only because His Holiness had made certain initiative changes for reserved seat for women in the Tibetan parliament. So initially when I started, I'm sure that this reservation helped me to get into the parliament.
An asset for
Then
positive.
I also served as a deputy speaker of the Tibetan parliament. And yes, till today, I hold the record of being the first ever elected woman deputy speaker ever in the Tibetan administration. And I hope I make it as the Sikyong, as a political leader.
Yes. Bill?
An interesting question roll in, whether you've had any indirect contacts with anybody connected to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who have South Asian heritage. And if you have not had contact, might you try to have any contact while you're here?
Well, Bill, my brother, my oldest brother, Lodi Gyari, served as a special envoy to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and lived in Washington, D.C. for many, many years. And through him, I also, I used to sometimes come to visit him. I did know few people over here. And also because I was serving in Dharamsala as a deputy speaker and a member of parliament and later as a minister. So we had, good opportunity to receive and meet many people from the administration, from the Congress, from the Senate, on the whole, from America. But this time, I'm not making any special effort to meet mm, people in the government or as such. Though, yes, of course, I am meeting few family friends. Like today, I had lunch with Richard Blum, the husband of Senator Feinstein from
Uh-huh.
California. Yes. And it was lovely, I was meeting him after 3 years. And and then, yes, he did call Nancy Pelosi because she also happens to be a very close friend of my brother. I mean, a great, great, great supporter of Tibet, and yes, and so happened to be also a friend of my brother. And I have received her in Dharamsala before when she came in as a speaker. I was then the deputy speaker of
We
the
should
house.
explain, because not everybody might know that Dharamsala is the place in India
Oh,
which
yes,
the sort of
that's
the
true.
home in exile of the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan administration.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yes. As I just mentioned, yes, Dharamsala, when I make reference to Dharamsala, Dharamsala is a small, beautiful hill station in the state of Himachal Pradesh in India. And it has been the home of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, in exile in India, and also the seat of the Central Tibetan Administration. Yes.
We have another question about can Tibetans fight for complete independence again, since China is not responding to the middle way approach? It occurred to me that India, you're talking about non-violence. It was often said about Gandhi that the secret of his success against the British wasn't just the non-violence, is that he could stop advocating non-violence. And the British knew how dangerous that was. If he stopped preaching non-violence to hundreds of millions of Indians under suppression. So I'm wondering, it's the reverse part of the policy. Non-violence, ahimsa, always carries with it the implication that violence is possible. So that there are, I'm sure, voices, firebrands within the Tibetan community who are advocating sort of going across the mountains with AK-47s or the equivalent, and taking up where things were left off in the 50s. Is this a factor?
Well, I always say, who would not want to have one's own home to oneself, you know? So therefore, of course, every Tibetan or any person, any nation under occupation would want to govern themselves, to be independent. That is only natural. But yet, when you mentioned about India, yes, and also about Mahatma Gandhi, they had the Second World War that happened,
I know.
and also the many other factors that led to the independence of India. And of course, the great sacrifices that the people of India made for the freedom and independence of India can never be undermined. I salute them for that. Yet at the same time, the case in our case, the situation is very, very different. It is not a question of what I would want. It is more a question of what should be done so that the oppressive policies of the People's Republic of China that is undergoing in my country can be stopped. Time is running out for us. So when we talk about negotiation, it has to be something which is acceptable to both sides mutually. So therefore, we are compromising, I would say. For me, it is a compromise that ready to live in association or within the framework of the People's Republic of China, provided that China allows us to, at least in domestic matters, govern ourselves and have a genuine autonomy as they claim in their constitution and other laws.
So
can you
pursuing the
feel,
British and India example again, one of the key factors, apart from the sacrifice and the struggle of the Indian people, was the fact that back in Britain, the people in Britain voted in a Labour Party which was committed to Indian independence. They were affected by the word coming from India and by Indian patriots in Britain who lobbied for independence and and against colonialism. Unfortunately, there seems to be very few avenues that you get your message through to China. Are there any? Are there things that we miss? Can you get your message of cooperation and a peaceful coexistence through to the 1,000 million Chinese through the Great Firewall?
See, I cannot say for sure what would be the future course for Tibet and the Tibetan people. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama also always says that ultimately it shall be the people of Tibet, the Tibetan people, the majority of the Tibetan people who should decide what should be the future state for Tibet. But yet, in our efforts, being in exile, where we are not facing any threat, our policies are framed more on our consideration for the plight of our people who are under oppression today, under the occupation of People's Republic of China. And also, yes, when we look back into our Tibetan struggle also, we started off with complete independence. I mean, that was the logical way out. One wouldn't have thought of anything else. So from 1959 till about 1979, till Deng Xiaoping conveyed, to the brother of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Mr. Gyalo Tentu, that anything, minus independence can be discussed. We believe we are still on that track. Yes. And also, I believe that, China should realize that it is only because of the initiative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Like, for example, for a person like me, I grew up hating the Chinese. I'd never seen a Chinese like a real communist Chinese, but the atrocities, whatever my family had gone through, what my nation had gone through, I took them to be my enemies. But gradually, listening to His Holiness, His wisdom, I at least today, for the better of my nation, and that we are not just fighting for a piece of land, we have greater fight, that is our identity as a race, as a culture, as humans, as Tibetans. That needs to be preserved. And time is not really on our side. But hopefully, if things change in the world, I'm sure there can be better time for Tibet too. Why not? But under the prevailing circumstances, the option for us is finding a peaceful solution. Human life is precious. So we are trying to pursue, yes. And very, very, very thankful. I would like to use this opportunity to really thank the people, the government of the United States, irrespective of the political party. You have been supporting, you have raised your voice for violation of human rights inside Tibet, for freedom, and also you have supported dialogue. So hopefully things will go fine for us.
can you feel the arm of the Chinese government in the United States and around the world wherever the Tibetan diaspora is. There was recently a case in New York where Chinese diplomats tried to infiltrate the New York City Police Department to then therefore infiltrate the Tibetan communities in Queens and in the New York area. Can you feel the presence of the Chinese security agencies tapping your phones, trying to put plant agents in your midst? Can you feel the pressure of the Chinese government outside of China?
Well, Bill, I would speak for me, in my personal capacity, I speak. I don't speak for the Central Tibetan Administration.
Yeah.
Yes. I would say that, the presence of or the penetration from the Chinese, attempts of penetration from the Chinese side has throughout been there among the Tibetan diaspora. I think it has been throughout there. But because we lived in India, so it was more in the India, more in India before. And there has been few occasions, I'm sure, that where the Central Tibetan Administration, the Tibetan government in exile, as we may also refer to, has reached out to the concerned governments in India also. At times, such complaints were taken very seriously, and at times, maybe not too very seriously by the concerned governments. And I'm happy that, with government like the United States, where you have actually, according to your own investigations, which is, of course, I understand under trial now, that a person working for your police department could be a Chinese spy working with the role or the responsibility of spying and working among the Tibetan community in America. So I'm so happy that it has come to your attention through your investigations. It is not just us talking. And also in India, we also see, I believe, that this penetration, not just among the Tibetan communities, but also in the media. The Rakesh Sharma case, he used to write some really, outrageous articles sometimes. And I saw on two occasions such articles where, I mean, I would not go into details as to what he wrote, but then I took his article to the concerned authorities and government of India in my personal capacity also, and showed them, well, what is this guy up to? Who is he? And I'm so happy that now some investigations are going on. So definitely, yes, it is there, I'm sure, it is there. But then we Tibetans also have to be more careful because I tell our Tibetan people also, these days we have to be so careful that even if you're talking with your best friend, you have to be careful, because even if your best friend is telling you something with the best of intention, but maybe he has the Chinese virus, somebody has tried to influence his mind in certain ways, you never know. So yes, I think it is a time where Tibetans must be very, very alert. And I'm so glad that personally, I feel very happy that this exposures in India and New York has happened at a time when the Tibetan election was announced. Really, our Tibetan people, I hope, are more and more careful, that their influence is there, definitely. And
If you
you
remember
know more than
one
me,
of the
Bill.
quotes from,
Okay, I'll not go much into it. Yes.
one of the quotes from Chairman Mao is, when the enemy attacks us, it's a good thing because we know that we're doing the right thing. So if the Chinese are spying on you, it means they think you're important, which is a good thing.
That's right.
But I also, there's an aspect we haven't mentioned here, but it's come up increasingly in the economic press. Tibet doesn't have oil, it has water. The Tibetan plateau has almost, a huge proportion of the world's fresh water. So it's actually got a strategic, and we all know that it is not a good thing to be sitting on oil, for example, to be on resources that other people want. So, I mean, does this change the equation for the Tibetans? The fact that suddenly there's the whole of Eurasia sitting around it thinking, we know what we could do with that water if we get the chance.
I'm sorry, but I must again say that way back in 1980s, His Holiness the Dalai Lama was already talking about Tibet's environment. In his 5-point peace plan, he talked about deforestation, concerns about deforestation. The climate change matters. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been yelling for a long time. It's his major concern. And even today, His Holiness the Dalai Lama continues to fight for a safer world for all of us. And yes, Tibet is the source of about 60, 70%, I think, now if I remember correctly, 70% of population in Asia are dependent on water from the rivers of Tibet. And what China has been doing with our natural resources, the rivers, we were the first one talking about the diversion of the Brahmaputra River. We raised our voice against building of dams inside Tibet. But then not much attention was given earlier. Now, and I really hope that the new administration, new government here in America will pay more attention to world environment. And really, Tibet is called today the third pole for various reasons that I would not go too much into detail here. But yes, saving Tibet is not just saving the 6 million Tibetan people, saving the environment of Tibet, which is the roof of the world, is also saving the world.
We have some questions that have come in from people who appear to be Tibetans, and the timestamp is 9:29 a.m. Where in the world is it 9:29 a.m.? But here are the questions. Can we trust China if they give us some kind of deal based on a middle way approach, as we all know what is happening in Hong Kong? And the second question is, how do Tibetans stay together despite being scattered all over the world? Is it a concern for you?
Yes. Can I trust the Chinese if we come to some terms through a negotiation? I would say yes. I would want to trust. I would want to trust because we are sincere in our efforts. We are sincere in really wanting a solution through negotiation, through dialogue. But nobody can forecast for any country or for any situation. For that matter, even if Tibet today becomes independent, China again might invade us the next day. So future you can never say. Yes, Hong Kong experience, when we see, it's very frightening. But yet at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, we also have our own experience. China imposed on us the 17-point agreement in 1951, through which it legitimately made some ways to take over the government in Tibet. We lived with them from 1951 to 1959. We tried. But China failed us. China did fail us. Yes, even if we look at our own experience, we don't have much reasons to want to trust the Chinese as such. But what I totally believe is that no matter what, we have to find a solution. Things must change in Tibet. And the way for change is through dialogue. So therefore, I think, we have to put our faith there and hope for the best. And largely, from the Chinese point of view, again, they also raise one question always. That question is, well, you are actually talking about independence in disguise. They're not trusting us. That is why also we are not finding a solution from our side also. So the trust factor is there. So therefore, from the Chinese side, Bill, what I'm trying to say is that the proposals that His Holiness the Dalai Lama made, the initiative from our side, even the last one that we did was in 2008, we handed to them, what we would settle for, that for a genuine autonomy. We gave them in written a memorandum. But the Chinese are not ready to even initiate a dialogue on that memorandum. And according to the words of their spokespersons and also the letters that we read in their white paper on Tibet, very clear that they think that they do not believe that we will settle for the genuine autonomy that we are seeking. They think that this is a way or a step towards complete independence. So they don't trust also. So yes, the trust factor is very important. So therefore, I do hope and I believe that the Tibetan leadership and the Chinese leadership and must come to a realization that the path suggested, initiated by His Holiness the Dalai Lama is the only way, which is mutually beneficial to both of us. If we come to that realization, that then I'm sure not because the Chinese care for us, but because China would care for themselves and we would also comply.
I'm
This is
afraid
what I
we've
think.
come to the realization that we're running out of time now. I know Tibetan Buddhism is timeless, but unfortunately the Foreign Press Association
That's
is
right.
tied into Eastern Standard Time. So we'd have to be finishing now. First of all, thanks to Bill, who has lent his expertise to us yet again. And thank you especially, Gyari Dolma, for your insight and I think illustrating, how should we say, view of what the way forward could be. And I want all of you
The vision,
out there,
yeah, the vision.
the vision, yes, the
Right.
vision thing. And for all of the rest of you, the vision thing, we have regular press conferences like this. You may sign up on YouTube or our Foreign Press Association webpage, on Facebook, or our webpage, in fact. We'll have regular press conferences. We're eager to have them for other people and to present views that don't normally get a chance. And of course, it always, let's say, gives us pleasure to tweak people who abuse authority. So it's a great, I'm sure there are people in Beijing who are marking our names. Well, Bill's already on, I think mine is as well, on a black book as a result of this. But it's good that we've managed to do this. Thank you, and come again for the Foreign Press Association of New York. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Thank you.